Cameras live.
Thank you. Good morning, fellow directors and everyone watching at home. Thanks for joining us today. I'd just like to acknowledge our gathering in various parts of the territories of the Coast Salish peoples and welcome you to today's proceedings. Ms. Legault? Approval of the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no changes.
Thank you. Moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you. Any public input today, Ms. Legault?
There have been no submissions for public input, period.
Thank you very much. And no delegations? No correspondence? Information items? None there.
Reports. Item R1 is a report from the Finance Division regarding the 2021 budget process, priorities, and analysis approach, and the recommendation is for direction.
Okay, anyone wish to speak to this? Yes, Ms. Soldera. You have to unmute, please. Still nothing there from my end.
I can't hear you either, Talitha.
So I've just unmuted your mic, Talitha. Do you want to try again? No.
Unfortunately, it looks like some IT problems. Anyone else wish to take that on?
Yeah, in Talitha's absence, while she's getting that figured out, I can, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, so we have provided previously to the board a basic layout for the budget process. At the time that item was considered by the board, there was a suggestion of wanting to revisit the direction for the budget, the analysis process, that sort of thing. So this has been the first opportunity that we've had to bring this forward back to the board. So it's back in front of the committee, essentially to determine if there is any changes that the committee wishes to make to the budget process, recognizing that in order to meet the timelines that we've already given our staff their direction, and they've been working under the original direction. So it's here before the committee for discussion.
Great. Director Marsh.
Sorry, I'm still getting used to the muting and unmuting. Through you to, I guess, Mr. Carruthers, if Ms. Solda can't speak. This would then also mean that zero budget includes our contract with our employees as well, right? So it means cuts, correct?
So through the chair, we have existing contractual obligations, obviously, with our agreements. So that is going to have to be considered in terms of staff attempting to meet that 0% tax requisition increase. We've had an opportunity to come back to the committee with some specific functions that those targets cannot be met for a variety of reasons, and that approval has been given. For the balance of our budgets, staff are continuing to work under that direction of 0% requisition.
So I think that was a yes, right?
Well, I'm not going to make an assumption about, you mentioned cuts. I'm not sure through the chair if Director Marsh is referring to staff cuts or cuts in levels of service, but obviously staff are going to have to make recommendations with regard to what measures need to be taken in order to achieve the 0% requisition. It could include cuts of certain expenditures. potentially staffing cuts, although I'm not aware of any specifically. But we'll get through that when we get into the detailed budget discussion. Staff are still developing those budgets as we speak.
So if I just may say one thing, and I don't have a recommendation for any number at this point, but in the late 2000, I got elected in 2011, and the term before me, 1 year they had a 12% increase, and it was as a result of several years of this kind of budgeting, until you can only take so much meat off the bone and then the animal dies. So I would caution the board to look at what is needed, what is wanted, who do we want to be, what's our strategic plan, and obviously keeping into account the struggles of the people after this year. But I think to just go zero right out the gate perhaps is wasting a lot of staff time, because I actually it'll get paid for eventually, and I just don't think that's a great idea. But as I said, I don't have a number in mind. I'd prefer for staff to come back with what they think is the leanest thing that we could do without cutting services.
Thank you, Director Morrison. We do have direction from a previous meeting, so we will move forward on that. I have a speakers list. If I missed anyone, please. I have Director Salmon, Acton, Director Wilson. Anyone else before we move on? Director Kuhn. Anyone else? Director Nicholson. Okay, we'll start with Director Salmon, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to wonder, canvas people, but as I was looking through all the documents as we begin this budget process, strikes me maybe a workshop to make sure we all understand. I mean, we've got so many pages of the budget documents, all the schedules and the 5-year financial plan. Just looking at the solid waste item we have coming up today, it struck me that, I mean, the whole 9 pages of budget cost center reporting, and appreciate a workshop just to review these. I wondered what other people would think of that. Or ask Mr. Carruthers if that might be a possibility.
That's certainly a possibility at the will of the committee to have a workshop to basically orient the directors to the budget process. You're correct. It can be a complicated process with a lot of documents, but again, I would leave that to the will of the committee. And if that's the case, we will attempt to organize that.
Maybe I'll come back to that if let others have a chance to speak.
Mr. Chair, can I go ahead? You're on mute. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Perhaps that's a good idea if we all have a different understanding, but my understanding was that we missed the we had submitted our budget, COVID hit, we made significant cuts. The province, because of in services, because of COVID, layoffs, et cetera, whatever ways that we didn't actually spend a lot of our budget during that time. And then we would have, the province allowed us to transfer funds forward, which was something that they didn't normally allow. So we have an opportunity here to lower the taxes for people without necessarily lowering the service. And if the service is being lowered, we will see the budget and decide on that. And also if we can't even end at zero. So my understanding is we would maximum budget zero. And then if needed, we'd use that extra surplus and move that forward for that service to continue for this year. And so that we're able to relieve some of the burden from our constituents who are affected by COVID, and we weren't even actually certain of how this is actually going to continue to affect the citizens in the Cowichan Valley. So correct me if I'm wrong, but thank you.
Thank you. Director Wilson, you're up next.
Find the right button there. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to welcome Director Marsh back again, but just to remind her that we've been through this talk about cuts and everything else. I really don't want to go down that road again. Thank you very much. And I would point her towards one of the sentences in the report that's been presented for information. And it says that a target of 0% increase be set and that a business case be provided for any increases above 0%. So if Director Marsh is looking at cuts and cautioning us, I would caution her to read the report and see what it says there as far as targets are concerned.
Thank you very much. Director Kuhn, you were next, sir.
Yes, we had pretty clear instructions to staff with regard to zero increase, and if at this relatively early stage we now start fiddling around again and say, well, okay, maybe we'll have to revisit this, we'll have to revisit this. I mean, we're kicking ourselves. I mean, this is ridiculous. Let staff come back with what they think is possible or advisable, and then we'll have a discussion about that. Anything short of that will be just confusing for staff again. It'll confuse us, and it'll open up the whole can of worms again. We've been through this, so let's get into the next stage.
Thank you. A little bit of feedback there. Can you mute your mic if you're not speaking, please? Next, I have Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am interested in making sure that the information that comes forward from staff provides us with clear implications about what the target that we've set will do to service, but also asset management and hitting our reserves that we've targeted for good asset management moving forward. And the other thing that I'm really interested in is the strategic plan we were working on and making sure that our strategic priorities are included. And I am wondering if, maybe this is a question for Mr. Carruthers, if the budget process as it's being laid out is in sync with finishing our strategic priority discussions.
You there, Mr. Carruthers? Perhaps we'll come back to that question, if you don't mind, Director Nicholson. I have Director Morrison next, I believe. Anyone else while I'm looking around? Go ahead, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I think staff have been given pretty clear direction. I just know that in talking to a number of directors, there seems to be some confusion about what that zero actually means. And my understanding is each of our 180 some odd budgets are supposed to come back with a zero requisition increase, unless otherwise authorized by us to go above or there's business cases made. I know that there will likely be a desire to keep requisition down 2 years from now, and I know that there's a number of projects that I want to see done in my local electoral area, F Parks, that I don't think that budget will be able to be kept at zero. So it's not a global zero. It's each of the budgets will come back as zero or unless authorized to go over. And I think each of us will have our individual business cases for individual projects that we deem will be important. And I don't intend to be subsidizing any of the budgets that I have immediate control over by using up, operating reserves and reserves has been authorized by the government to do, but I don't want to leave the cupboard bare at the beginning of next term or at the very end of this term. So it's going to be a lot of tough work for staff, and the electoral area directors will have a crack at electoral area specific budgets in about a week's time. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we move on to Director Wilson, I see Mr. Carruthers is back. If we can go back to Director Nicholson's point on the strategic plan, if you'd like to readdress that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies, my system froze. So obviously the timing is not perfect for alignment with our strategic plan and our budget. We have a workshop scheduled later this month for the board to review the final draft and to confirm the strategic plan. And so we're going to have to do a little bit of massaging through the budget process to make sure that we have the capacity and the board has the capacity to address those priority issues, not only in this coming budget year, but the following budget year as well. So we're going to have to do our best to ensure that we're able to accommodate those strategic objectives as best we can in the upcoming budget. It will be a bit of a delicate balance as we go through the process.
Do you anticipate that being an all-day session, perhaps, Mr. Carruthers?
Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that it'll be a half-day session. The board has put considerable time into its strategic planning deliberations, and our consultant is in the process of putting the final touches on the last workshop outcomes. And so I'm hoping that what the board sees is something that they will be happy with and can readily endorse with some minor modifications. If not, we may be back to spending some more time at it, but we have a half-day booked at this point in time, Mr. Chair.
So I'm wondering through fellow directors. There we go. A little bit of feedback there. With fellow directors suggesting perhaps a workshop, budget workshop, whether that could be piggybacked on that day as well.
We could do that, Mr. Chair. We have already piggybacked a communications workshop on that day. We'd had a separate day booked, so we had planned to do that in the early afternoon. But certainly, again, if it's the will of the committee and that's a priority, then we can do whatever is necessary to make that happen.
Great, thank you. Just wondering about the timing. Did you have a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if there should be any adjustment to the budget schedule to make sure that we're able to pull in the priorities easily into the budgeting process.
So, Mr. Chair, I think what would be best to do, and Ms. Saldera can speak if she chooses as well, but let's await the outcome of the strategic plan. Leave that with staff to see what we can do in terms of accommodating those items without having to adjust the time frame. If it appears that we need to, certainly we can do that, but I'd like to have staff take a crack at seeing what we can do to absorb and accommodate those issues without having to amend the time frame that we're currently on. It's a pretty aggressive schedule, and if at all possible we could avoid that, we'll do our best.
Great.
Before I move on to Director Wilson, I see Director Yanni DiNardo as a first-time speaker, please.
Mine was about housekeeping. I have 2 Kate Marshes on my screen. I'm not sure if that's part of the feedback or not. I'm getting a lot of feedback, so maybe that could be addressed. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
You're muted, Director Marsh.
Sorry, my computer seems to have gone crazy.
Perhaps if we could have you log out of both and then come back in, that may solve the problem. Reboot or whatever you need to do. So I have Director Wilson next. Is there anyone prior to him speaking again that wishes to take a turn? Director Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Director Nicholson as far as the asset management is concerned. That should remain a priority. But I have serious concerns about the strategic plan. The key word there is plan. It's not a directive. It's something which we planned for, and we need to examine it in accordance with the local circumstances, and perhaps not just the local circumstances, but the national circumstances as well, with the onset of COVID and everything else. Of course, we have to have a plan, but that plan is adaptable, and I've used these words before. You plan for something, and then you adapt as circumstances change, and this is what we have to do. We can't stick rigidly to something which we've planned for in different times. We have to be adaptable, and that's what I'm looking for as far as the strategic plan is concerned.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Director Salmon, you wished to speak about the workshop?
Yeah, I think if we could have it an addition to the strategic plan and communications. I mean, not just an overview and sort of pointers from someone in finance about the function and all the various reports and which are the key ones and which less key. I think it would be quite useful at this stage of the budget process. So if people are in favor of that, I'd be very happy.
Great. Director Stone?
Just a question for Mr. Carruthers. Is that the 15th of September, the scheduled date?
Through the chair, no, we are booking, I believe it is September the 25th, the Friday BCM.
It's still in my calendar for the 15th, and we do have ministers' meetings that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Okay, I saw Director Smith's hand.
Thank you. I was looking at the budget calendar, and I believe Director Morrison was indicating that on the 16th of September, electoral areas will be reviewing the budget items, but we're only on the 16th of September. It's only budget item line 250, and the rest of the electoral services are on the 18th of November. So electoral services won't be starting in September. It'll be in November that we'll be doing our reviewing. And we'll have the strategic plan in place by the 18th of November. Is that the goal, Mr. Carruthers?
Through the chair, that would certainly be our goal. However, it will depend on the board and the board's acceptance of the strategic plan, but I would certainly hope that after our workshop on September 25th that we can finalize that plan and bring it back to the board for its adoption.
Great. Any further speakers to this? I think we've heard that there is a desire for perhaps a budget workshop, and if we can accommodate that somehow prior to the strategic plan and moving forward, I think that would help in our further direction on some of the subjects. Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you leave it with staff, we will attempt to prepare a brief overview just to give the directors some assistance in reviewing their budget documents, and we'll tie that in with our strategic planning day.
That aligns with everyone. It's fine. See some nodding, etc. Oh, one says no. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties here with feedback, etc. So if you bear with me and everyone else, Director Smith, especially if you can speak into the microphone closely, you were very hard to hear. Director Acton, you had something?
I just think I don't think we need a workshop, but if everybody thinks we do, then fine. But, I'd rather just let staff get on with it.
Ms. Legault, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R2, report from the Finance Division regarding the public consultation process on the 2021 budget. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the public consultation plan outlined in the August 6th, 2020 report from the Finance Division be approved.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, it's Councillor Marsh. Can you hear me?
I can now, Director Marsh. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, that seems to have solved the problem.
Okay, and Ms. Legault, I didn't miss anything that anyone said. I just couldn't get back on for a while.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
So on the item now on the floor, is there someone that would like to move that? Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by alternate Director Duncan. Comments? Questions? Yes, Director Nicholson.
My apologies. I've never been able to download this particular report. So what is the public consultation that's being proposed?
Yes, Ms. Sarah.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So staff have proposed that we will set up a recording of a general overview of the budget process and how the schedules work, etc., for the purposes of the public, so the public can understand also how to use our website and navigate our budget. We will perform this recording and put it on our website for people to access whenever they would like, and then they can learn a little bit more about the CVRD budget process. That would be the first step, and that would be done in October. Staff then propose using Place Speak for soliciting feedback of the public on the budget process. Place Speak is, we would put one topic up for everyone to view, so it would not be specific to an electoral area, but would be more general. We could ask questions such as putting a list of all of our expenses and asking for people for their feedback on which certain services are more important to them, fire, or would they support spending more on water and sewer services or more on protective services? Those sorts of questions, just to garner some feedback from the public. With Place Speak, we can tell where people live so that we can then factor in the feedback that we get when helping make our budget decisions. We would have this Place Speak topic also up and available for the public to comment and to view, and hopefully in October, in early October would be our plan. And then the third item on the list is to have virtual public meetings. We would use the technology called WebEx Events, which is essentially a presentation style where people can pre-register. So that way, if we do not get any pre-registrants, we can not hold the session for that evening. But we can set up a variety or a number of WebEx events for people from various areas where we can more specifically address the budgets of those specific areas. We would ask that electoral area directors and municipal directors in the relevant areas be present to help answer any questions that we may get from the public. And that would take place in November and December after the budgets have been publicized and are available on our website so that we have some more information for the public to share. So that's our plan for how we will do public consultation for the 2021 budget, given that in-person meetings will be very problematic for the year.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And that sounds like a good plan. I am wondering about Place Speak though, because I continue, although I think the idea is really good, I really have a hard time using it. And I'm wondering how much, if we have good stats on whether the community is using it very much, or whether we could also push the information out on Facebook or other ways.
Yes, please, Ms. Sarah.
If I may, I would defer to our communications department for their expertise on the best way to push it out. And so I will work with them to make sure that we try and reach the largest audience possible with all three methods of trying to engage the public. So we're trying to engage more people than ever before. Last year, we had some pretty low participation rates with only 0.06% of the population actually attending public meetings or participating online. So we definitely hope to get that participation up a lot more. But I will be working with communications to find the best ways to do it.
I have alternate Director Duncan. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question and a comment. Question being, how much notice would you need before you canceled the virtual meeting? And comment being that I believe the city of Duncan has probably had more PlaySpeak participation than we've had people show up in person for meetings in the 14 years I've been on council. So PlaySpeak does provide a platform that the public seems to be adopting. So I would suggest that you stick with it, even though some people seem to have trouble getting online.
Thank you. I have Director Acton next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think PlaySpeak is a really great way to go because it allows people to not hide behind a false name or they're real people. But that said, soliciting feedback on the budget is almost like we're going to listen to their, and I think it's more like we want to consult people on the budget. They haven't been a part of the whole picture. There's that is such a small group. If you ask for feedback, it's going to be a very small group that's going to dictate what's going to happen for the larger good. I don't know. I'm just really, I know there's people in the public right now freaking out that the way I just presented that, but I think we really need to be careful of what kind of information we ask for, and if we're actually going to listen to that feedback and apply it to the budget. So I guess is my point.
I think we understand where you were going with that, and hopefully the public does as well, so you don't get chastised, but I'm sure you will. I do have a speakers list. If I missed anyone, please let me know. I have Director Morrison, Wilson, and Marsh. Anyone else? Director Morrison?
Mr. Chair, I yield on this. I actually have a comment about our last item, so I'll yield on this item until it's dealt with.
I'll come back to you on that comment if you wish after we deal with this one. Director Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as PlaySpeak is concerned, I've always had, from its very introduction and the first time I used it, serious doubts as to the veracity or the independence of those responses which come forward on that. I have absolutely no faith in that platform whatsoever. And this goes back to what Director Acton says here with small groups getting involved. And we know we're going to get some stones thrown at us for mentioning small groups. And this is what I've seen happening on PlaySpeak. Don't like it one little bit. As far as the public consultation and the questions are concerned, I know that finance does a very good job of what they're doing there. And perhaps some public consultation is required. What I'm concerned about is that any questions which are posed to the public are phrased in such a way that they do not elicit a predetermined response. And you know what I'm talking about here. You can pose a question where you know what answer you want to get back from them. So if we're going to pose questions, let's make sure that the answers are not going to come back in the way you want them to. They should be coming back as the way, or should be asked in a way that will elicit a response which is truly the feelings of that person. And I can make myself clearer on that one if you so desire. Thank you.
I think we know where you're going, Director Wilson. Thank you very much. I have Director Marsh next, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think that small groups if you'd like to use that term, affect any particular in-person budget meeting. I myself was practically tarred and feathered in a small group, by a small group, when we were bringing forward the idea of taxing for affordable housing, and which, congratulations to all of you that worked on it, that we've become a pilot project for that. So that argument doesn't resonate with me. What really does resonate with me is something that was stated earlier about the COVID, because what I think is, I know I have awkwardly today, because this is a new platform for me, but I have spent so much time in meetings online, Zoom meetings and Doxy meetings, and, you know, I meet my doctor online. I think that the public is more than ever ready to communicate online. So I also wanted to mention to staff that I was not able to either look at or download this item either, just as Director Nicholson mentioned. So what I did was let Miss Carlo know, and she actually just emailed me a copy of it. And I thought it was really well written. And now when I'm trying to get back to it and go back and forth on here, it's not working. So I'm not going to try to do that anymore. But it seems to kick me off, and I have to kind of, I hear you, but I don't see you, and I can't get back to you without going through the whole process again. But I actually think it's a really good engagement plan. And I think that the majority, particularly of people who've been really adversely affected by this last year, by losing their jobs and losing business, will do their very best to give their input. And, you know, perhaps they'll do the old-fashioned letter, some of them, but I do believe that whoever said this is the way of the future, I believe it was alternate Director Duncan, and how well it's been working in Duncan. I think that we should stick with it. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Any further speakers? I think during this difficult time that any public engagement is welcomed, whatever format we choose. And kudos to staff for coming forward with some suggestions on how to move forward on that. Alternate Director Duncan, I do see your hand and I recognize you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did have a question as part of my comment, which was how much notice is needed on the virtual meetings and canceling them. So, you know, like, the staff going to work right up to the night before, or is it a week when you're asking people to sign up? If they don't sign up, is it a cutoff is a week? Is it 3 days before the scheduled meeting? So just an idea of when you would cut it off.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Soldera.
We could even cut it off the morning of. It's staff will have the materials essentially ready to go anyway. But I know what happened last year was we had in-person meetings, and so we had to haul all of our stuff out and go to them, and then no one attended. And so just to make it so that staff don't have to work in the evening would be, we could even cancel it by noon on the same day. So.
Okay, I hope that suffices. Has this been duly moved and seconded, Ms. Legault?
It has been moved and seconded.
Thank you very much. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, Ms. Legault. I'm sorry, before we move on, I did afford Mr. Morrison an opportunity to speak with your indulgence. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I certainly don't want to reopen the entire discussion, but after hearing Director Acton's comments at the end, like, I have absolutely no desire to sit in on another budget workshop. I've got all the work that I need done for my electoral area. I'm fully cognizant of what's going on. We have a well laid out, clearly defined budget process. So I'd be more inclined to ask staff to poll the members of the board that would like to have some extra information provided to them and do that one-on-one or in a small group, I don't think we need to assemble the entire board. And there's lots of people that are giving the thumbs up to that. So could you do that, please?
Fair enough. I think that's been noted through your comments and thumbs up from various directors. Those that do need it will reach out, and I'm certain that staff will be working with them on a smaller basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My apologies, Ms. Legault. If move to the next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 is a report from the Recycling and Waste Management Division regarding the 2021 draft budget review for Function 520 Solid Waste Management. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the 2021 budget for Function 520 Solid Waste Management include a requisition increase of $602,354 over the 2020 budget.
Thank you. I have Director Wilson. Director Wilson, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought you were making a list there of people with their hands up. I've read through this report and I can see the reasons asking for this. One of the things, waste export costs of $992,000. And I'm wondering what plans do we have to move away from shipping all this stuff down to the United States? Because there is going to come a time where then they're probably going to say, sorry, we don't want your stuff anymore. Do we have plans in there to actually move away from shipping it down to them, maybe on a region-wide basis? Is there anything being thought about as far as bringing this cost down? There are some other bits and pieces that I'm looking at, and I will come back and ask questions about that. But right now, I'm asking whether there are any plans to move away from this particular way of getting rid of our waste. Thank you.
And who wishes to take this? Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, I can, if any of my staff want to respond as well, that we recently being a year and a half, 2 years ago, went out to expressions of interest to look at alternative waste disposal options for the CBRD. And at that point in time, there were no acceptable alternatives available to us. We will be going out again to test the market. The technologies are emerging, regularly in terms of solid waste management. And I will turn it over to Mr. Werich to provide maybe some more detail on that.
Your video is quite blurry, Mr. Werich. I'm not sure got a background there or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think I'm having a difficulty with the this setting as well. So my apologies for not being as clear on my picture. So I think it's
as long as your answer is clear, I think that will suffice.
I will try. So I think that's a good question, and I think there's a lot happening as the CEO mentioned as well. There's a lot of movement. I think one of the positive movement as well is the Cache Creek. Cache Creek is also looking into getting the right approvals and permits. So I've been in touch with them as a matter of fact. I do understand that there are some other waste to energy technologies and interests right within the Cowichan Valley, as well as the other ones that we're talking about. So I think there's a lot happening outside. We do understand that it's only a matter of time that we'll get the other option. Unfortunately, with the currently as of today, this is the only option that we had. We sent out the impression of interest, and this is the only thing that we had at this moment. But I'm very hopeful that going forward, we will have a couple of things to look into.
Thank you very much.
Follow up, please, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that that we're looking at these other things here. And to be perfectly honest, I think this is a question of we should be looking very, very carefully at it and try to make it happen sooner rather than later. And if that means that we have to perhaps invest in some capital projects, then I'm all in favor of that as well. And it's one of those things that could be done in conjunction with other authorities, such as the CRD, such as the municipalities. It doesn't have to be just a very small thing for us. So I'll be following that one with great interest. Thank you.
Great to see you there now, Mr. Werich. That's way better. Did you have a reply to that, or you're okay? Now I'm going to look at the waving hands and go through my list. I have Director Yanni DiNardo, Director Kuhn, Director Marsh, Director Salmon. Anyone else before are you waving, Director Morrison, or waving off? Okay, Director Yanni DiNardo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to update the committee as well, there is, I believe it's AVICC, the committee that we've been sitting on for a while now, with a lot of partners around the island to try and resolve this issue, because every community is having the same problem. So there's not enough in one community to work on the discharge of our garbage. And Rabanco does also, just to inform everyone, does do the waste to energy, if I'm correct, Mr. Warich. And so that currently is our only option now, but there's been a lot of work done on it. If you're fairly new, you can look up that information too, or I could send it to you as well. But there's been a lot of work been happening on this, and I just wanted to move the recommendation, but I'll wait for the rest of the committee.
Oh no, please do. We'll get a mover and a seconder while you're at it. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by alternate Director Duncan. And I will move to my list. Director Kuhn is next.
I'm somewhat surprised that this item is coming up at this time when we're in budget discussions, and this doesn't even seem to be part of the budget. So I don't get why we would have to deal with this now. If we have a budget discussion, we should all discuss all the items at the same time. This should not be a separate item that is totally urgent and it has to be dealt with outside the budget or whatever. If we approve this, it'll be a fairly sizable increase, which will screw up the rest of the budget. So it should be looked at as part of the whole budget and not just by itself. And I'm surprised this is coming up now.
Appreciate your comment. Reply from anyone? Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, I believe, and Mr. Warich can clarify, there was an opportunity, if the board is so inclined to want to be looking at its fees and charges in relation to this budget, we require provincial approval in order to do that. So this is coming in front of the board to make the committee, to make the committee aware of this issue, and that if there were any mitigative measures they wanted to take, they could at this time. This is probably your single largest budget, and I appreciate Director Kuhn's concerns about it being dealt with as a one-off basis, but the complexity of this budget and the current circumstances necessitate that.
Follow up, Director Kuhn?
Yes, the way the report reads, it kind of indicates that there's almost no other choice, and yet I dispute that. There is a choice. We could reduce service. And I know that doesn't like to be discussed, and we don't like to look at this, but it is a possibility. And for this to be presented in a way that, yes, we'll try to look at a balanced budget, zero increase, but you'll have to approve this first. To me, it's hokey. It's not a proper budget process.
Okay, I'll go back to my list. I have Director Kuhn. And then Director Marsh is next.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I was trying to find something about the tipping fee for food waste. And so I'll start with a question, because I don't live in any electoral area. I noticed that your bins are very large. Is the food tipping bin as large as the garbage bin?
Thank you. Through to Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chair. So I think these little ones, the totes that we're talking about in the report, they're the ones that you use at home. You know, maximum probably 75 liters. So those are the ones that you can bring it to the recycling centers, CVRD recycling centers, and they're accepted for free. Is that the right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen North Cowichan's, but they're probably about that size and they're green.
Same size.
Pardon me?
It is the size that we're recommending that.
Yeah, and they are picked up at the curb. So, I mean, in the interest of lowering GHG emissions, is there any reason, like what happens to it now? I guess I'm confused. Does it go into the garbage now? If you don't use one of those, are they not required?
That's Mr. Warwick.
So 30 this year. So as we all understand that all the munis they're picking up from the curbside, from the electoral areas, it's not at this moment. And hence we have an option where a resident in the electoral area who's separating their kitchen waste, they can bring their little catcher, food waste catcher, to a recycling centers to dispose of for free. And it's then kept separate and processed as a food waste.
Okay, well, if I may say something, I find it shocking that in 2020, the CVRD is not insisting that food waste is separated from garbage. Yeah, I just can't believe that, actually. Go ahead, Mr. Warch.
Go ahead, Mr. Warch.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think there's a good news from the province. As of 14th of August, we have our solid waste management plan for 10 years that has been approved. Strategy number 3 talks about the universal curbside service, which is a 3-stream service. So that will be applicable. So we'll be working on it starting next year.
Oh, excellent. That's really good to hear.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I'm just going to go through my list, make sure there isn't anyone else. I have Director Salmon, Morrison, Wilson, Acton, and Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you. Just so on the staff report, I'm just looking at the options. There are 6 options shown to reduce the increase. So question, I just asked about the 2 that relate to South End. One is to eliminate the free yard waste drop-off, and the other one is to eliminate the subsidized packaging and printed paper drop-off. So on the yard waste, the question is, so I assume if we eliminated it, people would then have to drive to Bings Creek or the free drop-off there. But would that not increase costs at Bings Creek to have more waste to deal with there? Is that factored into this?
Mr. Warwick?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I don't. So these are all the low-hanging fruits as per se for the options that we're saying. This is because we listed it as we have the recycling centers, and these are satellite depots. They're for the convenience of the residents, for the local residents. But if you close it, yes, there's an extra cost to that. But if you close it, yes, you're right that the residents will have to take their material either to Fisher Road Recycling, you know, because they do all the composting, or they're going to have to utilize the free tipping for the food waste that we're talking about. They're going to have to come all the way to Bings Creek or other recycle center.
Okay, so that cost savings identified, we wouldn't really realize all of that because the increases up at Bings Creek would go up to compensate. Okay. My second question then, on the subsidized packaging and printed paper, how does that work? Could that not be put in the blue box already, that packaging and paper? I wasn't aware there was a subsidized service for that.
Mr. Warwick?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it's the same point as there's some materials that are accepted within your blue box. There are others they're not. When they're not, people bring it to our recycling centers, and in the past they've been bringing it to Bings Creek, Peerless, or Meat Creek, but they didn't have the facility at the within the south side of it. So we had bid out this opportunity for the south end, and Fisher Road Recycling won that as a satellite depot, so they can now accept those materials they're not accepted within the blue bin.
One more follow-up.
Final one, if you would. Yep. Back to you,
So could you just give an example of what printed paper is not acceptable in the blue box?
So there are some other the plastics. There's so many kinds of plastics: the hard plastics and the soft plastics. And some of the crinkly ones they were not accepted before, but then there are so many kinds that they're now are accepted within the recycling bins. But then there's still others that they're not.
Okay, thank you.
So there are colored styrofoams as well. There are many kinds, by the way, more than just plastics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wirich. Director Morrison, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reiterate and reinforce what Director Yanni DiNardo had said. There's been I think a 4 or 5 year task force of the coastal communities working together to establish a path forward for dealing with the solid waste on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. And there's a lot of effort been put into watching the technologies that might prove to be effective for the area, and an awful lot of research being done. Just in the time that I've been here, we thought we were going to have an opportunity to ship our solid waste to Comox, and it looks like Victoria is looking at doubling the size of Heartland landfill right now, and those are opportunities, but they just haven't evolved yet. My main point is I'll support the resolution, and it's a well-written report, and I just want to take a moment. I don't want to debate with Director Kuhn, but we've actually asked staff to do exactly this. We told them to do a zero budget and bring back ones that aren't going to be able to make the grade, make the zero. And this was anticipated. So I've looked at the report. They've done exactly what we've asked of them. I don't see any palatable options in the cost reduction that I could see would be acceptable in my community. If we go to eliminating the free drop-off of yard and garden waste, well, we better start looking at subsidizing the groups that are going to go out and clean up the bush, because people are going to be dumping not only their yard and garden waste and their invasive species in the bush, but they're going to be dumping their garbage in their fridges and their hot water tanks and the like. So I look at this, it's a big number. I really wish we could do something about it, but I don't know that there's anything that, other than nibbling around the edges, that's going to have a dramatic enough impact for us to reduce this number. So I'd like to get this approved, move forward, and look at the other areas of cost saving. And it's going to be a long day. So if we've got questions about what can go in the blue box and what can't, maybe that's an offline question that we could ask after the meeting's done. Thank you.
Thank you. I have an extensive list here. I've added you, Director Marsh, so I recognize that you're added at the end here. I have Director Wilson next.
Am I on there, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you are. You're after Mr. Wilson.
Sorry, Director Wilson.
That's all right. First of all, in answer to or to address Director Marsh's shocked response at us not having a 3-stream collection, we actually have this here in Area C. We have the blue boxes, we have separate food collection, and we have separate garbage collection that being done mainly by the private company. So we do have a 3-stream one down here. Any reduction in service is going to, as Director Morrison has just pointed out, is going to result in more burning, more illegal dumping, and all the rest of it. And I'm looking through this. I've looked through it before. I don't honestly see anywhere where we could actually offset these numbers. To eliminate the free yard waste drop off in the south, big mistake. But I did ask the question of finance, what cost impact this would have on the average household. And I have full faith in the accuracy of these numbers. The number that's come back, an average rise of $2.55 per household per 100K of household value. So For a 500K home, it's going to cost you $12.75 per annum on top of your property taxes, $25 a year for a $1 million home. So although the overall number is high, it is, the actual impact per household is fairly low. And I think Director Morrison has already addressed Director Kuhn's concerns as to why this is being brought forward now. Very good reason as to why it's being brought forward now. And I will support this resolution, even though I am a little bit reluctant to do, but I will support it. Thank you.
That surprises me, Director Wilson. I'm smiling, as you can see. Ms. Soldera, I thought I saw your hand. Would you like to respond?
Just to let the committee know, the reason that this was put on this agenda, number one, the board has already given this service an exemption from the 0% mandate, but we wanted to make sure that the board had time, or the committee had time, to consider if you did actually want to increase some rates for 2021, we need time to be able to amend the bylaws in order to allow us to do that. So we've brought this report to this agenda for you to think about it and to have the time to consider those amendments, and then if you wanted to make them, we would have time to follow through. This budget will come back as part of the regular budget discussion, so you're not finally approving the entire increase at this time. We're making sure that that's the direction that you're giving us, and you will reconsider it when we reconsider the rest of the budget items later in the budget process.
Appreciate that clarification. Thank you very much. I'll go through my list. I have Director Acton, Director Nicholson, Director Smith, Director Marsh. Is there anyone else? Let's go to Director Acton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I agree with all sides of the conversation here. I would like to see us cut some of the costs somewhere, and I thought Director Kuhn's comment of reducing the service was interesting. If we went down to every 3 weeks, what would that look like? Would there be a savings there? There has been one item that we've never actually done that could reduce it, is we've never actually had a food waste bylaw where people were actually not permitted to put food waste in their garbage in electoral areas. But I know that can be a touchy subject. But, and then also to the point of only $25 a year for an average home, that's $500,000. That's how much an average home is now in the Cowichan Valley. It may not sound like a lot, but it's cut by 1,000 deaths. And we are in really challenging times for people. I was at my dog groomer yesterday, and they were saying how expensive the recycling was. And they happened to be saying that because they had an item that was pulled out of their recycling, and then that came up. So I don't know. I think we have to be really sensitive to people's circumstances right now, and we should find a way to reduce. It's my understanding also that we increased this budget by $500,000 last year. So people just can't keep. Somewhere we have to, and it is a service that the community expects, but we've asked for zero budget, and I think we could try and accomplish that in as many ways as possible, and this is a big one. So I hope if this passes, we'll still discuss some of the other options for reducing it.
Thank you, Director Acton. Unfortunately, we've also endorsed zero waste as well. So, interesting point. Director Nicholson?
Thank you. Are we actually? I'm interested, I think, in exploring options 1 and 2 a little bit more. I think a good case is being made for option 1 to be included. Option 2, I was quite amazed that the net loss is $24 a ton or whatever for garbage. And so I am wondering about the increases that are being proposed and what the increases have been over the last 3 years. And so how much of a percentage increase have people seen over if we went with this increase? based on what we've been doing in the past, and also how this would stack up to other jurisdictions on the solid waste management.
Mr. Werrich?
Through to Ms. Chair. So it's important to see absolutely what's happening on the other sides of the CVRD. So on the south side, CRD, I think they're in the range of $110 a ton. RDN is looking into around $130 a ton. So they're all lower than what we were offering as a tipping fee. Our tipping fee just a couple of years ago was at $140 a ton, and that had been there for many years. We did increase it to $148 a ton, and I'm thinking my recommendation is that any increase would end up in other consequences, for example, illegal dumping and other stuff. And we also have a lot of other commercial and other contractors. They bypass sometimes our recycling centers and others, and the waste disappears just because of the cost as well, because it's cheaper, or they have other ways of dumping other way around. So I think $148 for not having a landfill is a pretty decent one, but we're one of the highest ones in BC probably.
Follow up, Director Nicholson?
So you're not recommending option 2? Is that what I hear?
Through to you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. I'm thinking, knowing what we know from the past experience, that I think this is a decent one. The options that we propose here, these are the gradual increases that you may want to look at it. I know this is it's a sour pill at this moment, but we're hopeful that in the next few years we will have more than one option to consider, and I think that'll be the only solution. At this moment, you don't have a solution other than, if you just want to cover up all your costs, you'll go straight from $148 to $172. That'll cover your requisition. Problem is that what are the consequences within? So our problem is we can look into one of the option, but that's not the only option it's going to affect. It's going to affect other options. So right now, if you have yard and garden, if you say I'm going to put a $5 tipping fee on it, that's also going to reduce the other things that they're bringing into our facility that also provide the revenue to our recycling centers. So everything is connected on one side of it. And just on the overall side of it, I know it's not your question, but we have control over what we can accept. So that's obviously, $148 a ton, and the other tonnage fees that we have on the revenues of the recycling. But we're looking at about 35 different contracts. They're all external. One may be connected to the other, and some are independent. But we have no control over. Every year they increase. So right now we have an increase, a significant increase in terms of Urbanco, and this at the same time the other contract for mobilizing the material. But those contracts are now done for 3 years, so we can have the stable increase. They'll still be increased to maybe another 2 to 3% within their contract, but it won't be a big impact for the next 3 years or so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warch. Next up is Director Smith.
Thank you very much. I was glad to hear that as of the 14th of August, that the province has approved a 3-stream service. We've been waiting for that for a long time. It's something I'm wondering about. Will this increase the cost for the electoral areas to have the compostables picked up, the food waste? And will that then be added on to the bill? And will it will it move enough out of the waste stream to have a financial impact by moving the food waste weight-wise out of the waste stream? Can you please give me some clarification on that? Thank you.
Mr. Werrich?
Through to you, Mr. Chair. So that curbside budget is a separate budget. That's function 515. So all the costs will be considered at the time of when we do a business case for those options at that time. So this is a complete separate one.
And if I may, through to Director Smith, I think most communities that do organics see a 40% reduction in weight, in waste, on tipping fees, et cetera. So if you're diverting 40% of that weight from $143 to the lower rate of kitchen waste, there is a savings in that. I hope that was correct. That's anecdotal numbers from Lake Cowichan for you. Director Marsh is next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And also, it's helping to meet the greenhouse gas targets when you divert the compostables. And I really appreciate you bringing up zero waste, because there are many of us that have our garbage in North Cowichan is collected every 2 weeks, and it might take me 6 months to fill up a garbage can of garbage. Yet I still pay, I think we've gone up quite a bit from $80 because of the reasons Mr. Warch is saying it's costing more. But I remember feeling for many years resentful that I had to pay $80 a year, you know, like my neighbor who was every 2 weeks having this big stack going out. So I would like to see us, and, you know, today's not the day to have that discussion, but go back to some of those principles, one of which was zero waste, because we were leaders in words anyway. I don't think that it actually followed through in actions, but zero waste is really the way to go. And from what I've been reading since COVID, the waste has increased considerably. I don't know the percentage. I imagine it varies from location to location. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I support the resolution. I wish it wasn't so, but we, if we are going to consume the way we consume, we're going to have to pay to have our waste taken care of, and that's just a fact of life. So, you know, I encourage everybody to work closer towards zero waste as an example to your constituents. And I'm in favor of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marsh. I have Director Salmon next.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the option one there, looks to me from the staff report, that's basically recommended. It says eliminating the annual transfer will not affect the regional district's capacity to address remediation works. Am I right? Work?
Yeah, through him, it's sure so I think it's one of those options, you know, those, again, you know, having said that, you know, those are the low hanging fruits. So the reason that is that we have we're taking $2 a ton from the overall tipping fee and keep it for remediation. I think the reason that, you know, there's only one paragraph, but there's a lot of history here. So we have a lot of historic landfills and the remediation fills that we need to take care of, and in future. Would this cover all the costs? It will not. So we're still going to have to go borrowing and all that. So that's why I think it's one of the options that if you choose so, we can cut that $2, and that $2 can compensate the requisition. Is that going to be a big deal? Probably not. We're looking at 24,000 tons a year. That's the anticipation total tonnage. So you're looking at about $48,000 times two. 24,000 times 2 is $48,000.
Okay, so. Well, I just think we're trying to get to 0% somehow. If we can, every little bit helps. So I would think if we wanted to approve this, but with option one, it would still be going ahead at increase, of course, but not as much. So I would prefer that option myself. And I'll don't know how to propose that. I could amend the motion, I suppose.
You most certainly could.
Well, is there anyone else? Is there a seconder for that?
So the amendment would be to add the elimination of the remediation reserve of $48,000, moved by Director Salmon, seconded by Director Nicholson. On the motion, Director Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I trust I'm still on the list to speak to the main motion. You know, for those of us that have had the meetings as to our exposure for remediation costs, this is I think a really dangerous precedent to set, even though it may seem like a small amount. Mr. Warch has said that we're going to have to go and borrow significant dollars in the future. And when I'll relate to the saving for the new hospital, we decided to put dollars away on a regular basis so that we wouldn't have to borrow as much in the future. And this is exactly the same principle, putting dollars in the bank so that we're not going to be faced with such a big bill to borrow in the future. And while I understand that there's pressures on all of our taxpayers at this point, I think staff have done a really good job on putting forward. I will not be supporting this. I see it as somewhat short-sighted. Thank you.
Great. If you'll bear with me, I have 3 lists on the go now. I'm going to speak to the amendment. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on the amendment? Director Stone.
Just following on Director Morrison's comments, I think, you know, obviously any fiscal management, it's better to save than to borrow. And this is, in a sense, a part of asset management as well. This is liabilities that we must maintain. And if we're talking about the number that is proposed there, that 48,000 is going to make, you know, if a 600 and change increase is $2.55, reducing that by 48,000 is only going to take, you know, 30 cents per 100,000 or something off of that, or even less, maybe 25 cents per 100,000 off of it. And like we, you know, and Director Morrison also mentioned the hospital, that sort of annual requisition can flip over into debt servicing once we do that. If we take away that reserve that we're building, not only do we increase borrowing, but then we have to increase the function again to do the debt payments on the borrowing, to do the remediation. And this would provide a smoother transition, not only in reducing the borrowing up front, but also in helping support the debt payments that may be required for those remediation projects. So I also won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. On the amendment, Director Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Stone has actually said everything that I was going to say, so I'll be brief and just say what he said. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any further comments on the amendment? Director Nicholson.
I am just wondering how much we have already put away in reserve and what the anticipated are going to be, what the
Mr. Warich, off the top of your head?
I will probably defer it to Talitha if possible, if she has something in handy, but I'm thinking it should be less than 300,000, which is not even a, you know, less than few percent. I don't want to say, you know, a number because I don't know all the remediation costs that we have in total, but it's obviously in millions of dollars. It will not be in hundreds of thousands.
And all you have to do is reference the Mead Creek and Peerless Road remediation that we did previously as to the cost of that. I think they were extensive.
Now, Mr. Chair, in the report, it says just under 260,000 in that reserve.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Director Duncan, did you have something on the amendment?
Yes, on the amendment. Yeah, I was just going to say there's only $260,000 in the reserve already. It's obvious that you're going to have to borrow a ton of more money in order to do the proper remediation. So I think that in the short term, this is a good idea because there's so little in the fund already. You're going to have to borrow lots to get everything straightened out in the long run.
Appreciate it. Further to the amendment, ladies and gentlemen? So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Do you need those recorded? That motion is defeated. Now back to the main speakers list. Director Marsh, I may have missed you on a follow-up question. I apologize.
Actually, it's my fault. I forgot about it. I wanted to ask, well, I wanted to make sure my assumption is correct, which I hope it is, because if not, I need to go to CVRD school. That the $992,000 is spread around just through the electoral areas. Am I right, Mr. Warrich?
Please.
I'll again probably defer it to the finance. I think it's just the regional budget, so it's not just the electoral areas. That's my understanding.
I believe everyone's nodding. All the people who've been here a long time. It's regional.
Yes, you're correct. It's a regional budget, so therefore it's paid for by the region.
So if I could say it sort of in plain English, anyone in the electoral area who puts whatever they put in a garbage can are being subsidized by the municipalities to do that, but the municipalities are not being subsidized by people in the electoral areas for what we put in our garbage cans. Would that be correct to say?
Through the chair to Director Marsh, yes, this function is a regional services, so all expenditures within this service would be paid for regionally.
So can someone explain to me what would make it a regional service when the whole region isn't utilizing it? Or is it because of the tipping places?
I think management resides within regional district jurisdiction, and I believe that's why it's regional. If I'm mistaken, you can correct me, Mr. Carruthers.
So, a refresher for the directors. Regional districts are responsible for solid waste management across the province on behalf of all of their members. So we are responsible for receiving and disposing of the waste on behalf of all of our constituents, whether that waste be collected in our residential areas of our municipalities or our electoral areas. And
okay,
so we have
I need to go back to school. I'm sorry.
We have
so in other words, you take what we collect and it comes to you and you dispose of it.
Right. And so the collection of waste is different than the disposal of waste. We collect our waste from our electoral areas. The municipalities have their waste collection systems, although they vary. And then we, as a regional district, are responsible for disposing of all of that waste, as well as managing all of the distribution of recyclables, yard waste, that kind of thing.
So then, in fact, which has been said by many people running in the municipality in the past, it's only $80 a ton to pay for garbage. That actually probably wasn't true because we weren't factoring this number in.
Ms. Soldera.
Through the chair to Director Marsh, I just want to clarify that curbside pickup is function 515. Function 520 is for the transfer stations.
Okay.
So that transfer stations are available and that's for the full region. So that's why it's a region-wide service.
Got it. Well said. Now I got it. Don't need the class now.
I don't think you need to go back to CVRD school. You may want to buy the Coles.
Well, I may need to for other things.
You may want to buy Coles notes on solid waste management. That's all. We have an extensive list still, and we're pushing to an hour and a half. I think we were anticipating perhaps a short break at an hour and a half. Or do you wish to continue?
I'd like to take a short break if anyone else is in favor.
Can we call the question?
I'm sorry, I still have a speakers list, but I appreciate. I'm not in the mood to be challenged as the chair. So if we can take a 10-minute break.
Yeah.
See you back here at a little after 11. Back, we'll reconvene. I do have some names left on my list, but most have already spoken. So it's the pleasure. I will gauge the committee to see if you're ready for the question. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? I have Director Kuhn and Director Acton that are opposed. That motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no other business items, so that will bring us to question period, and I'm just going to check the email account at Legislative Services. And there are no submissions for question period for this meeting, and there's no closed session, so.
To adjourn. Move adjournment.
So I have a mover and a seconder for adjournment, quite vocal, I might add. All those in favor of adjournment? Those opposed? I thank you all for your tolerance during this and getting through those IT technical difficulties. Not on IT's end, on our own personal end. So we will see you shortly.